shut out of City Hall and was elected in that little revolution. And then slightly thereafter, for those of you who know San Francisco history, there was the assassination of Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone, and shortly thereafter, district elections went away and there were citywide elections. And of course, the barriers to entry in citywide elections are much higher than in a district election, and you have to be backed by the Chamber of Commerce and the developers and the realtors, and that was the way it went until the year 2000, when we returned to the district election system, which is when, as Scoot Nisker says, if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own. Thank you, Gary. And so I put my name on the ballot in 2000. I had actually no expectation of winning. I had been involved in the neighborhood where I live in North Beach with the likes of Mark Bruno, getting advice from John Vardis. It was in some ways very much the way it is today. We had a superheated economic environment, and we had a political environment where a handful of extremely well-connected politicians at that time, Willie Brown, who was at the zenith of his powers, who reminded me when I was elected, when I was talking to him, he said, "Son, you need to understand something. The year you were born was the year I was elected to the California State Assembly." And I thought, and I was 35 at that time. And here we are. I actually never expected to run again. What I did was public service. I was really blessed. I was blessed in any number of ways, largely through a series of the kind of things that Kathleen just acknowledged. Neighbors and neighborhoods who were shut out of City Hall were the kind of folks that, as a neighborhood activist, I was involved in helping give a voice to. And that's how I met the likes of Jan Blum, who volunteered in my office for 8 years, and then led the fight to turn the Francisco Reservoir into a piece of open space. You helped lead, don't be so humble, Jane. Which in this district, in this corner of the city that has the least amount of open space per square foot per capita, was exactly the right fight to fight. And when I first got to office, I had absolutely no idea of what I was doing. I knew what it was like to go to City Hall and say, you know, please don't knock down the Colombo building. We don't need more high-rises north of Washington Street. I knew about the city that I love and that we all love, and the human scale neighborhoods, the oldest neighborhoods that are District 3. And I have to say, as I came to learn about the entire city and how it works and how it should evolve and grow, that this corner of the city, the northeast corner of the city, is a remarkable spot. It is where the Chinese settled and were ghettoized and ultimately thrived. It's where the Italian families came and created this vibrant community that we call North Beach. It's where Coit Tower was built with the WPA era murals. It's got, or it used to have until they changed the district lines a few years ago, the crooked street on Lombard. When people on the planet Earth think about San Francisco, they think actually about District 3, from Fisherman's Wharf all the way to Union Square and downtown. And somebody said to me, I think John said, boy, this must be the largest district in the city. It is actually the smallest district in the city. And why is it the smallest district in the city? Because we actually have the highest density of any part of the city. The 11 districts that span San Francisco each have about the same number of people, between 75 and 80,000 people. And by the way, the number of registered voters in this district is less than half of that, about 34,000 registered voters. And remember, not all those people are eligible to vote for various reasons. But this is the smallest district because it is the densest district. And as San Francisco is dealing with this gold rush tsunami, we've got a bunch of decisions to make. And as a matter of fact, those were decisions that I faced in my 8 years on the board. 4 of them as a member and 4 of them as the president of the board, which is how should we zone the city to allow growth in the right way? And we, through a real planning process, not the kind of planning processes that go on today, which really are not about planning, but about rubber stamp permitting, came to the conclusion that less dense areas of the city that could absorb that kind of growth where you wouldn't have human impacts and displacement, like the south of Market, our traditionally warehouse district, along major arterials, like what you see where we ripped down the Central Freeway on Octavia, where you see those new buildings going in. What we did at the Hunters Point Shipyard, where I authored legislation to build 10,000 units of housing. And the reason I'm saying all of this is because I love watching how certain individuals who have incredible access to the media and power are recreating history and saying that the Board of Supervisors that I served on created the housing crisis of today. Absolutely not true. As a matter of fact, in the days that I was on the board, we were producing 8% more housing per annum than we are producing today. That is a documentable fact. The number of evictions that were happening in San Francisco when I was on the board were far less than they are today. Last year, the best numbers that we have on record, 2,154 documented, registered evictions in San Francisco, and 3 times that money estimated not documented. What are those? Those are buyouts. Those are people who got a threatening letter or a phone call who didn't know that they had rights and left in the middle of the night. But there are ways to address this. There are ways to address this within the district and outside of the district. So let me just say a little bit about what I would like to do if I got back on the Board of Supervisors. And the reason I can use that terrible word "I" is because right now, for those of you who do not know, there are 11 members of the Board of Supervisors, and I have been endorsed by 5. And my opponent has been endorsed by 5. So everybody, every time there's an election, everybody who's running for office wants to tell you, this is the most important election ever. It will change the future of the world. Well, in a small way, that is true in this election because it will swing the majority of the board. So
wait, is the 11th undecided?
No,
the
11th is this seat right here.
The 11th is this seat. And Jamie, that's a really good question because before I get to what I'm going to do,
No, it's this seat.
Right, Julie Christensen is undecided.
Julie is definitely decided. But you just touched on something, which is, John said something which I think is fundamentally important relative to our system of government. I actually think that the messy system that we call electoral democracy with its checks and balances is the best system that we've got on this planet. It works a lot better than totalitarianism. It works a lot better than many systems of government. And yeah, it's messy, and yeah, it's slow, but it's all about checks and balances. And I don't believe, regardless of Julie's policies, that democracy is well served or best served when the chief executive appoints to the legislative branch of government. Because in this business, you dance with them that brung you, as Jesse Unruh said. He was the great speaker of the California State Assembly. And fundamentally, when you're appointed by the mayor, you answer first to the mayor and second to the electorate. When I ran 15 years ago, I had a lot of people to thank when I won. I had landlords to thank, I had tenants to thank, I had homeowners to thank, I had Chinese people to thank, I had white folks to thank, I had Russian folks who only spoke Russian who lived at 1590 Broadway who voted for me in droves because they knew my grandparents came from Russia. When you're appointed by the mayor, you only have one person to thank, and that's the mayor. And I don't think democracy is best served when the checks and balances that make our system work are undermined. But now let me get to what I want to do. We're dealing with a housing crisis, the likes of which have probably not been seen for 150 years. They were pretty bad 15 years ago in .com 1.0, and by the way, I've got no beef with these folks who are coming here and working their hearts out all night long, coding and this and that. And yes, they're getting paid a lot, and yes, that is a part of what's raising the cost of housing, whether it's for sale housing or whether it's rental housing. But there are a number of ways to deal with this. Building is part of the solution. But building luxury housing that nobody in this town can afford is not the solution. And where did we see that play out? We saw that play out at 8 Washington. Does everybody remember 8 Washington? 8 Washington, for the handful of you who do not know it, was a proposed high-rise development on the Embarcadero on the waterfront. As John knows, cities are capable of making profound, irreversible mistakes. We made one of those. It was called the Embarcadero Freeway. Sue Bierman, who John knew back in the day, who served on the Planning Commission for 16 years, came to power by opposing the freeway that was never built, that was going to go down the panhandle of Golden Gate Park. We almost made that mistake. And by an act of God, the Loma Prieta earthquake, and by an act of government, Art Agnos, we tore down that Embarcadero Freeway and we reunited San Francisco with its waterfront. And what a boon it has been for recreation, for commerce, for aesthetics, and a remarkable thing that rarely happens in urban America. And the developers said, we'd like to raise the height limit because we're politically connected and we're going to build a building that was higher than the Embarcadero Freeway. And Ed Lee said, absolutely.
Anything you want.
Anything you want. And the Board of Supervisors had to pass a law to raise the height limits. And many of the people in this room did something that had not happened in a generation. We collected over 30,000 signatures in 29 days, and we took that to the electorate. The other side spent $2.7 million. Our side raised an unbelievable amount of money. Jan was on the installment plan. We raised almost $500,000, and we won 2-1. Not just in this district, in the Sunset, in the Excelsior, in the OMI, in the Mission, in the south of Market. People loved their waterfront, and they knew it was a mistake, and they knew City Hall was out of touch. What's my response? My response is, we're not requiring developers to build enough affordable housing on site. What's the law today? The law is 12%. And by the way, that was a radical law that was passed 15 years ago when I was on the board, introduced by now State Senator Mark Leno, one of the endorsers of this campaign. And the development industry said it would be the end of the world as we knew it, not another stick would be built. Well, guess what? We set it too low. Maybe it was right for that market, but in this market, we can actually prove that we can go north of 30%. And why do I say that? Because last November, we stuck another measure on the ballot, again, through popular signature. Proposition B, the No Wall on the Waterfront Initiative, that said, we took the power away from the Board of Supervisors and we said, if you want to raise waterfront height limits on port property, our property, property of the people, the voters would have to vote for that. And along came Forest City Development and they said, well, we'd like to raise the heights at Pier 70 from 40 feet to 90 feet. The surrounding neighborhood in Potrero Hill and Dogpatch said yes. And they said to the voters of San Francisco, instead of building 12% on-site affordable housing, we'll do 30%. What's that say to me? We're leaving a lot of money on the table that can be used to house extant residents of the city and county of San Francisco, so that as the gold rush happens, not everybody is kicked out to Oakland and Vallejo and parts east and south, and if you can afford to move north, God bless you. And then there's the housing that we have. The most affordable housing that exists in this town is the housing that we have. And we're cannibalizing it. So if you saw the mayor's press release today, he said he wants to build 20,000 new units of housing. You see that, Scott?
Yeah.
Right. Well, a lot of it is actually already built, but we're cannibalizing it. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the phenomenon of short-term rentals. Okay? We call it commonly Airbnb. And let me just say for the record, you want to rent your house out or your apartment out for a month or 2 months or the weekend, doesn't bother me at all. God bless you. By the way, if you're a tenant, make sure you're not violating your lease and that you don't get evicted for that. Because many leases say, thou shalt not rent without the prior written consent of the landlord. And as a small landlord, my leases say that. So I just want you to know that. But when speculators come in and evict folks from 5 and 6 and 8 unit buildings to turn them into 24/7 illegal hotels, and the city's response is, it's absolutely fine. We're not going to enforce. Matter of fact, we're going to create a law that is fundamentally unenforceable. What do? We have to go back to the ballot. Proposition F on this November's ballot. And my response is, City Hall is shirking its responsibilities. The reason we vote for a legislative branch of office, the People's House, the lawmaking branch, is so that we don't have to go to the ballot and go to these fundraisers for $100 and $200 and $500 and $1,000. Our job is to see these things first and to regulate them. Government has a role to regulate these things. How many units of housing does Harvey Rose, the storied budget analyst, who I think you hired, were you on the board that hired him? He was, okay, so Harvey Rose, who is the independent budget analyst for the Board of Supervisors, who has worked continuously for that body since 1973 under left-wing boards, right-wing boards, do-nothing boards, do-too-much boards, is considered in all parts of San Francisco to be independent. He did an analysis and has come to the conclusion that 2,000 units, actually 1,900 some odd units, of permanent rent-controlled housing has been permanently taken off the market as a result of that. That's 10% of what the mayor wants to build. Let's talk about the Academy of Art. I am running as a supervisor in this district, which includes Bush Street and Sutter Street and Pine Street and parts of Geary. And I go down there. When I ran 15 years ago, a lot of these buildings were housing for people that lived here. Today, they're all dormitories. And yes, Alyssa Stevens deserves to make a living, but the government has a role to play. It has completely, if you read Forbes magazine, shirked its responsibility there. And again, one vote on the Board of Supervisors and we have a 6-5 majority. What's happened in the last few cycles in this town in elections, I'll tell you exactly what's happened. The amount of money that has been put by a handful of tech billionaires, and let me name their names because Lauren wanted me to name names. Where are you, Lauren? Lauren? Did Lauren leave? Lauren wanted me to name names. I'll name their names. Ron Conway,
Yeah.
Reid Hoffman, has never been seen before in San Francisco politics. And in John's day, if somebody came along and laid down $20,000, $25,000, that was big bucks. These guys are laying down $300,000 on little itty bitty elections like this. And it has created an atmosphere of absolute intimidation and fear. So I'm either absolutely crazy, or I'm really brave, or a little bit of both. But you're about to see in the next 55 days a huge smear campaign that is going to go into all of your mailboxes. And it is all about maintaining control for laws, whether it's inequitable tax law, whether it's inequitable housing law, and it's coming out of those folks. And what we've seen is that people don't want to run anymore. And so interestingly enough, we have a mayor's race today that is virtually uncontested. I don't think anybody in this room, whether you're Nan McGuire or Jim Stevens or John Bardis or Linda Marks, can remember an uncontested mayor's race. You can go back to
Gavin Newsom, his second run, which was the exact same issue.
And by the way,
Did you go up against him in that election?
No, I did not.
No, it was his second term.
And by then, the Ron Conways had become a senator.
Oh,
You're absolutely right. So up until Newsom too, there had been no uncontested election. So whether we're talking Agnos Molinari, Agnos Jordan, Brown, Amiano, I mean, we've got a storied history of that. And today we have none of that because people are absolutely scared to run. And I talked to my wife and I said, you know, I don't think democracy is best served if the mayor's appointed incumbent does not have a challenge. And that is when I decided to leave the sidelines and get back into this rather remarkable, crazy arena. I have spent, as John said, the years since I've been off the board working at the nonprofit that I've worked at for over a quarter of a century. We buy water rights to improve water quality on western rivers, primarily in Nevada and Arizona and New Mexico, usually for the benefit of Native American tribes, the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, the Summit Lake Paiute tribe, the Zuni Nation. But on the side, like a moth to a light bulb, I would see injustices in San Francisco that I was attracted to, that I felt needed some help. One of them was 8 Washington. The most recent one was the San Francisco Flower Market.
Yeah.
And while I'm delighted that we kind of sort of saved it and that will hopefully be around for another 100 years, it's been around for 103 years, it is the largest wholesale market on the west coast of the United States, one of 5 wholesale flower markets in the United States of America, the second largest in the United States of America. It supplies not only the entire Bay Area, but all the way to Reno, Nevada, all the way up the North Coast, all the way down the Central Coast. It's not just the 330 jobs that you see down there on the corner of 6th and Brannan. It is hundreds and hundreds of folks who grow the product, who deliver the product, and 14,000 florists in the immediate vicinity and 30,000 florists within their territory. Huge numbers of jobs. That place was going to be ripped down to become a tech office building. And what was City Hall's response? The silence was deafening. And I took a little page out of the old waterfront book, and we raised a little bit of money, and we went out and we got 18,000 signatures. And by the way, I would much rather win than fight. Fighting takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and we went to the developer and we said, we have 18,000 signatures. We can put this on the ballot. We have a poll. It shows that 78% of the people in San Francisco will vote to say that only the voters can raise the 40-foot height limit here. How about we work stuff out? And over the course of several months, the first thing I said was, these poor florists and dirt farmers can't afford an attorney. So if you want to, have this negotiation, you are actually going to have to pay for their attorney to represent themselves. And the developer smartly agreed. And over the course of 3 months, we put together a legally binding agreement to preserve the flower market for the next generation. And I'm honored, I'm delighted, I am proud. But that shouldn't be the role of a private citizen. That should be the role of City Hall. The mayor and the Board of Supervisors should be the first people to stand up to say, we're going to preserve this storied institution. The mayor and the Board of Supervisors should be the first people to stand up to preserve the Chameleon Cafe. The mayor and the Board of Supervisors should be the first folks to stand up and see whether or not there's a way to keep Lombardis in the neighborhood. And all of those are being pushed out. And all of the artists that make North Beach are being pushed out. And so I think that we have a role to play. And just my getting elected will show that independent voices can and will be heard, and that San Francisco has not been taken over by the 1%. So I appreciate your time. I really thank John and Kathleen, and I need a glass of water, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Can we leave these posters from you gave this to
Absolutely.
Kathleen Julie? Maybe you should check.
Absolutely. Here are Yes on F posters, and I've got even better ones
Okay.
that are available at my campaign headquarters. Thank you, Aaron. And then let me just say this about that. There are 55 days left in this election. We are doing, I think, remarkably well. The next 55 days will determine the outcome not only of this district, but the future of the city over the next many years. And I need your help. If you can come to one of our 2 campaign headquarters, the big one is at 1238 Sutter Street between Polk and Van Ness. We're open 10 a.m. until late every day. And the little one, which is our Chinatown and North Beach operation, is at 728 Vallejo by the police station. If you don't have a sign, grab a sign. If you don't have a button, grab a button. If you want to do another house party like this, I would be delighted to. It's all about voter contact. It's all about you convincing the 10 people that I don't know. I'm delighted to be in a room where I actually don't know everybody. This is a beautiful thing. I always love it when I go and a friend of mine introduces me to 10 people that I love that love me, but it's better when I meet a whole bunch of people that I don't know. So If you don't like to walk, we've got telephones. If you'd like to walk and talk, we can set you up with a little training and you can go out. We have an incredible set of endorsements, ranging from former Supervisor John Bardis to current chair of the Democratic Party, John Burton, to former City Attorney Louise Rennie. We've got some wonderful backing in the House of Labor, the teachers, the nurses, the hotel workers, the janitors, the clerks, the Service Employees International Union, the transit workers, the Sierra Club, and hopefully my phone will ring in a few minutes and we'll have the San Francisco Women's Political Caucus. We got the District 3 Democratic Club, and that's just a smattering. State Senator Mark Leno, Assembly Member Phil Ting, my former colleague Fiona Ma. Virtually every person that I serve with, and I know I've got a reputation of being tough and sometimes
Polarizing.
Polarizing and sometimes behaving badly, but I want to say that